Happy New Year, and I wish you all the best, especially excellent health. That is the most important aspect of life, as we all know. And we're starting in a new year. Some of you may have realized we changed the day, and yes, there will be only one episode per week now, which means every Wednesday there's an episode with me. We will do a bit less interviews for a very simple reason. I have a lot of work to do. These interviews are a lot of work. So I'm simply running out of time, and I have to serve my clients first, which I'm sure you will be able to understand. It doesn't mean that we will have no interviews, but we will have less interviews than we had before. And also we are very close to a very big number, which we're going to announce in due course of January, I am very sure. So now when the new year begins, new projects begin as well. And you know what happens then? Kickoff meetings. In the English-speaking world, they are far more common than they are in the German-speaking world. However, that does not mean that necessarily they go better. Because often when we see, and now we look into what are the usual challenges you face, what are the problems you have, and how you can do them better, what we often see is that especially companies are very keen that they keep the kickoff meeting outside of working hours. However, going to a kickoff meeting is work. It's not that people sit at home and say, hey, what's the best thing I could think of? Have drinks with friends, maybe meet them for a nice dinner. Oh no, that business kickoff meeting somewhere in the countryside. So probably you should rethink your approach, because when you say it's outside of work, people will behave accordingly, especially when you expect them to do it unpaid. And don't come along with they all do it for free, and because they love the business and they all volunteer to do so, we're a family, blah, blah, blah. They do it because you use social pressure to make them do it. There are very few exceptions where people truly volunteer. So issue number one is, when you do it outside of working hours, you already create the first problem. Not a challenge, a straightforward problem. You're creating a situation in which no one wants to be. And I went through many of these meetings as an external person. I got paid for doing them. However, I see what people do during these meetings. And especially today, where people take notes on mobile phones or on tablets, people often have headphones in so they can, for example, play games, do their emails, or do anything else than listening to the person in front. And that is exactly which comes with aspect or issue number two. Often you hear the same people talking that are allowed to talk anyway. People from the leadership area, people from the board, department leader, etc., etc. No one who at the end will do the work from the operational or technical level will have a single say during the whole meeting. And then people stand in front of the crowd, completely brief what to say. Every single word is rehearsed. And that makes every presentation really stiff, really not entertaining, and also really boring. And when then there is no space for discussion, or maybe saying critical aspects where you think there's a different approach or a better approach, and maybe you see issues other people have not seen here, then you can be sure that no one is going to believe a single word of what you say there. And the third part of the problem, before we look into how to do it better, please don't come up with idealized plans, which sounds more than a weird ideology than anything which is realistic. I don't go down the road of smart targets. Smart targets have upsides and downsides, but we agree now, even from science, that smart targets also limit you. Even when you could achieve more, you probably will not do so, because, when you achieve more this time, maybe they expect even more next time. So why overachieve when there's nothing in for you? So you idealize the plan, you put it up like an ideology, and everyone thinks you're living in cookie land and don't see what's really happening inside your organization. So how to do it better. And by the way, talking about doing it better, we received lots of emails over the year, and many people said, I have suggestions here and suggestions there. And many people were worried that when we go down from interview and my episode to double the length of my episode. No, this is not going to happen. I know that many of you listen to this podcast on your way to work, and I found it really impressive how some people told me that when you have children, you might have heard of the term binge watching. They sit down doing Netflix, watching 20 episodes, one after another. And we have people here doing binge listening with this podcast. Some people told me they go by car from London to Glasgow or from New York to Washington, and then they download 20 or 30 episodes and just listen to them one after another. Hats off to that. And thank you very much also for your support. So we have binge listeners on the road. That is truly amazing to me. And now we look into how to do it better. No worries, these episodes I do will be always short and on point. So first, when you want to do it better, take time, and taking time means kickoff meetings happen during working hours. When people do it outside the usual working hours, it is still working time, so in return they either get payment, which in most countries after taxation is not really rewarding, or they get time off, which most people prefer to get anyway today. And when you do it during working hours, if you can, and also please consider we have a global pandemic going on, so traveling still is debatable. So when we have this meeting, preferably do it off-site, which means somewhere outside your usual work setting, and the location you choose already conveys and communicates the first message of how important and what kind of role you see with this project. So, of course, you could say, hey, we're going to meet at the M25 at a moto station. They have meeting rooms as well for 30 quid. Yes, and then people will consider the meeting and also the project exactly as valuable as the setting you just gave them, where you have the lunch break in a local M&S or a Boots meal deal. Typical British trade. You don't get the meal deal. Instead of £3, you pay £3.20. You don't say anything at the cashier, but then you complain about it all day in the office. As a German, I have to say, address the issue. I've seen it happening. So address the issue. Tell them, hey, I got the meal deal, and the problem is solved. Sometimes being polite, not addressing the issue, is not the right way to do. But I find it hilarious that there is this cultural gap of Germans being way too rude, saying, oh, that's wrong, I have to pay £3, and Brits just tutting, or not even doing that, just looking at the cashier, paying it without saying anything, and then complaining for weeks about they didn't get the meal at the right price. Hilarious. But getting back to the main point here. When you choose the location, and again, please be aware that during a global pandemic, stick to the rules, look at where the numbers are. Do we have high or low numbers depending on which country you are now listening from? Don't travel when it's not necessary and it's dangerous, because you don't want to be responsible and accountable for a super spreader event or one of your employees catching COVID, having lifelong consequences from it. You don't want to be that person responsible and accountable for that. And also, we only get the pandemic off the table and done if we behave reasonably. So it goes without saying. But when you can do it offsite, do it. When you do it online, get a professional company running it for you. And aspect number 2 is then you set a proper agenda after you organize everything, take time, do it during the working hours, and have an offsite meeting if possible, or a professional company that runs it online. Set an agenda and then keep rooms for discussion. And discussion does not mean that at the end of a very rehearsed presentation you say, are there any questions? No one is going to say anything anyway, because they're just happy that the presentation is over, because probably it was way too long and way too boring anyway. Room for discussion means you have a professional host, either someone external or you take an internal person if you have someone who is doing it professionally, not someone who likes to see themselves on stage, polish their ego, and likes to hear themselves talking. A professional host that has done that before and is professionally qualified to do so. Every single level of your organization has the right to speak in these open spaces. No matter if it's the board or someone from operational level who works with you for 3 months. And of course, now when you say, hey, we have 5,000 employees, how shall we do this? Then, of course, you have elected representatives who are able to speak in their name and address issues openly. It is important that during a kickoff, you are able to talk about issues and address problems you already have, because otherwise they're going to explode anyway during the project. So you shouldn't delay it into the project. Address it immediately so you get the problem off the table as much as possible as you can during the kickoff meeting. And after you have that, so you took time, do it during the working hours, offsite if possible, pandemic rules have to be obeyed, or online, professionally done. Set the agenda properly with room for discussion, a professional host, and anyone is allowed to talk from every level of the organization. When you're too many, choose representatives. And at the end, don't say this is the overall #1 best project ever and you are the best. People have heard that, they've been there, they've done that, and due to the level of trust they have or not have towards you, they may or may not believe you. Do it in a proper way, as any reasonable person would do. There is a worst case scenario, there is a managed case scenario, and there is a best case scenario. So don't call it minimum expectation. Worst case scenario, And please be realistic with your projections. I have seen way too many executives and managers declaring the end of the pandemic for the last 8 to 10 months, and they were all wrong. And when you now step up and then you say on stage the pandemic is going to end in Q2 of 2022, you obviously know more than lead scientists on this planet. And as we all know, you don't. It was the mayor of Hamburg, Hamburg's mayor, my birth town, who said, end of 2021, the pandemic is over. He said that in, I think, September of last year. Well, it aged like milk. So the worst case scenario is what you hope to achieve to say that this project somehow had some success. The managed case is where you say that actually was pretty good. The best case is where you say that's brilliant. And if you want to, you can do the +1, which is the excellence, where you say the +1 extra would be if we were able to achieve X, Y, Z. But please show your employees that you have a view for reality, that in a world of VUCA, you probably have heard of that, VUCA, volatile, unprecedented, etc. It's very important that when you are in these unprecedented times, and I don't want to overuse that term, when we are in the times where you cannot project what's happening in the next 12 months, don't pretend you can. So worst case, managed case, best case scenario, plus excellence. And it is very important that you are able, especially when people are sitting there listening to you, and when you say we have it all under control, they know that you don't. I talked about VUCA before, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These are aspects people are facing right now. So when you declare yourself the oracle of whatever town you're in, maybe the oracle of, I don't know, Coventry, then probably people will not believe you for a good reason, and they will lose faith and trust, motivation, inspiration, whatever they need to run the project successfully. They will lose it due to you. And you do not want to be the executive who is responsible and accountable for that. So go with worst case, managed case, best case, plus excellence if possible. And here's the important point. Answer the question for the people who are sitting there. What's in it for you? And when you cannot answer that, and your only answer is, this is a change, it's a lot of work, a lot of hassle, and the only thing in for you is that you might keep your job in a year, that is not very motivating. So the what's in it for you question has to be addressed and answered. And by the way, what's in it for you here? If you now think, is there anything more than the podcast? Yes, even in the new year, when you go to expert.nb-networks.com, just put your email address in there. It's content only, 100% ad-free. Every Wednesday you get a newsletter, which is now condensed to the successful parts, or the parts that were most liked. We always keep it efficient, as you know. By my charming accent, you might have heard that I'm German, so I'm obsessed with efficiency. We keep it very brief, but it's free information available only on this platform via the expert.nb-networks.com platform. If, of course, you now have open aspects, some things you might think, oh, we have a kickoff meeting, but I have a very specific question. How can I address that? It's very easy. Just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. Doesn't cost you anything, and we have a chat from there. If you now think maybe we need someone for a kickoff, so you say we need a trainer or a professional speaker, we need coaching, consulting, mentoring, or maybe a bit more long-term mentoring project interim management, then you can contact me as well. But when you drop me an email, it doesn't cost you anything, and we take it from there. I had great discussions last year, and I will continue to do so, having them this year. Because now it is important that you apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will have the change that you desperately want to see in your organization. So I wish you a great start to a great, successful, and especially a very healthy year 2022. Apply what you hear here. I'm always happy to have a chat with you. Just drop me an email and we take it from there. And now I wish you all the best applying in your organization what you heard here. So for this week, there's only one thing for me left to say. Have a good start to the year 2022, and thank you very much for your time.